All right, hi, welcome back to Ask a Creationist. I'm Todd Wood. I'm a young age creationist and president of Core Academy of Science, and I'm here to answer your questions about creation, science, religion, faith, the Bible, Genesis, whatever you got. We're interested in hearing from you. You can contact us on Facebook or through email. I'm interested in hearing what your questions are. Maybe you'll be featured on a future episode. So this episode, we're going to look at a simple question, or a deceptively simple question. Are Neanderthals just really old people? This is a thing that's going around. There are some creationists who have made this claim in the past, and it kind of goes around through the rumor mill, and then I hear it, maybe Neanderthals are just really old people. Okay, well, that's an interesting question. So actually, it all relates to, of course, what we read in the Bible. So there's a number of places in the Bible where you'll read about people living a really long time. So Adam lived a total of 930 years. And Noah lived 950 years, and even Abraham lived 175 years. So people are living a very, very, very long time. So the question, I suppose, is if you could live that long, if you got that old, would you start to look like this guy? So this is L'Acheveloussin, which is sort of a classic Neanderthal discovered in the early 20th century. He's got a sort of a low forehead, and he's got a big brow ridge, and he's got a really big nose and big eye sockets. Is this what you'd look like if you were 200 or 300 years old? And as it turns out, these are really two separate questions. So the first question, I suppose, is, are Neanderthals old Homo sapiens? As I've just framed it there. If I could live to be 200 or 300 years old in my body, would I start to look like a Neanderthal? Now, there's an alternative question. It's a little more technical, and that is, how do we know if Neanderthals are really old? Let's say we don't worry about whether they're just us that lived longer. How would I know if a Neanderthal were 30 years old when it died, or 500 years old when it died? What are the indicators that we could get from a skeleton that would sort of tell us about the maturity of a Neanderthal? So the first question, are Neanderthals old Homo sapiens? And I think the question kind of boils down to, are Neanderthals just Homo sapiens? Or are they something different? And my answer to that sort of comes down to probably not. And I base this mostly on genetics. So if we look at classic mitochondrial DNA, this is a piece of DNA that's used widely in studies of human diversity, we'll find that Neanderthals are significantly different from any people alive today. So here I've drawn this out as sort of a genetic diagram showing relatedness, and this is based entirely on raw similarity of DNA sequence. I haven't done any evolutionary assumptions here about how related they might be. I've simply said, how different are they? If you know anything about it, I'm looking at raw nucleotide differences. So that's what this is based on. And you can see the Neanderthals here on the left in the green are way distant from the living Homo sapiens over here on the right. These are living people over here on the right. And in fact, they are more different from any living person than any two living people are from each other. And so that tells me these people are likely something distinct. They're a distinct, whatever you want to think of it, distinct family of human beings, distinct tribe, however you want to think about it. They're not the same as what we have alive today. So I don't think this is merely a matter of somebody alive living to be really stinking old. Neanderthals are definitely different. And you might be thinking, well, maybe the DNA sequence is just damaged and the differences are due to damage. Well, that could be a problem, except that there are multiple Neanderthals now sequenced, and they're all showing a very similar pattern of similarity amongst themselves. And that I wouldn't expect if it was just damage. If it was just damage, I would expect the damage to be randomly distributed around the genome. And instead, what we're finding is Neanderthals tend to be similar to each other. So I don't think that Neanderthals are just old Homo sapiens. If I could live to be really old, I would not look like a Neanderthal. But could Neanderthals be really old? So let's just not even worry about whether they're Homo sapiens or not. Could they be just really old people? Well, that's a little more complicated. And it sort of gets to the question of age indicators. So here's a classic Neanderthal juvenile pestalozzi, and looks young, right? I mean, it's got a really small face. It's got tiny little teeth that look like little baby teeth. This looks like a child, right? And we know this because we've seen children grow up and we know, oh yeah, when you have a tiny little face and a small head and little baby teeth, you're probably 7, 8 years old, maybe even younger, maybe 3 or 4. Likewise, here's Tashik Tash, another Neanderthal juvenile. You can see, this is really dramatic, you can see that the adult teeth are still growing in this mouth. So that's pretty neat. He's maybe 10 years old if he were Homo sapiens, right? Because that's about the time you're growing in all of your adult teeth and you're starting to look like a grown-up. But, of course, in both of those instances, what I've given you is hints from Homo sapiens, how people develop, and I've applied them to Neanderthals. But how do I know that's the way Neanderthals grew up and got old? And the answer is, I'm not sure. So is it possible that some Neanderthals are really old? And so then the question would sort of become, well, I kind of need to know what extreme longevity looks like. So if you think about life stages today, very crudely, you have a childhood, a period of growth, and that period typically ends mid-20s. And then you have a sustained period of adult maturity, and then you have the onset of old age and senescence, and then obviously death. And when old age commences, gets farther and farther off the older I get. It's kind of weird that way. But anyway, so I'm going to depict a human lifespan with the green representing the childhood and the blue representing adult maturity, and then the pink representing old age. So if you imagine, say, a regular lifespan of 80 years is that wide, right? Where you have those life stages. Did extreme longevity just stretch things out so that everything slows down, so that your childhood is stretched out to, say, if you're living 900 years, your childhood is 300 years, and your adult maturity lasts until you're about 600, and then your senescence and old age, that begins at 600, and it lasts for a long, long, long time. Is that what extreme longevity would have been like? Or could it be that it's very similar to how we develop today, in that it was very rapid maturation, and then a very long period of adult maturity, followed by a very brief period of senescence, so that only the adult maturity is extended? Or is it some mixture of the two, where you have an extended childhood perhaps, and then some sort of extended adulthood, but they're not extended in the same sort of proportional way? And so to answer this question of, are Neanderthals really old, we sort of have to understand, what do we mean by really old, and how are we going to model and understand this? So obviously we're going to want to look at multiple indicators from skeletons and that sort of thing to be able to understand it. But honestly, it's just really complicated because we don't really understand what this extreme longevity entails. We just don't know. Back to our two separate questions then. Are Neanderthals old Homo sapiens? Probably not. And how can we tell if Neanderthals are extremely old? Well, that's much more difficult. And that's kind of, the jury's still out on that question. So thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode of Ask a Creationist, check us out at coursesci.org/connect, where you'll find links to all of our social media and our website. You can find links there also to ways of supporting us. We are always looking for financial support. We are largely, about 80 to 90% of our income is donor-based. So if you would like to make a contribution, we'd appreciate that. And don't forget to like this video. Even if you didn't like it anyway. Subscribe, click that bell to get notifications when we put up new content. If you'd like to contact us, you can contact us info@coursesci.org by email, or you can check us out at one of our social media accounts and send us a message that way. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.